Hey everyone, and welcome to the Golf EQ podcast. We are on episode 4 in the Golf EQ podcast. Welcome. If you are new, it's great to see you here. What we have going on here is everything on the behind the scenes of Golf EQ and what's coming out in the future. There is a whole bunch of things that we'll be discussing. Today specifically, what we'll be talking about is you guys, how you're going to be testing for your clubs. It's super important to know what kind of clubs that you're going to be needing, especially for using the club identifier on the Golf EQ website. If you're not subscribed, please do so. Like our videos; it's going to help a lot, and share it, to everybody, because a lot of this information will be super valuable for you guys moving forward. I have Damien here. How's it going, Damien?
Good. Thanks, Pat.
And basically what we're going to be talking about today, Damon, is what are the mistakes people that you're going to be commonly seeing, of what testers or golfers are going to be doing to test for their own clubs. Like we'll be talking about range finders, launch monitors, where can they get tested, so all of this information will be good for you guys. So Damon, tell us, how golfers should be getting tested for themselves, and what are some of the mistakes that you're usually seeing from that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a really important kind of point to help golfers help themselves. I think for some golfers, they have access to very high quality club fitters. And so I always recommend going and seeing those people if they can. There's usually a couple limitations that sometimes do not enable golfers to go and see these high level club fitters, one being cost. So normally, if you get fit for a full bag, you're looking at anywhere between $100 and $300. That's just the club fitting. Then plus you tack on the extra price of adding the new clubs. And so that becomes very expensive and kind of cost prohibitive for a lot of golfers. Secondarily, these places are only located in certain geographic regions. So I'll speak just kind of for the US because that's what I have the most experience with, but you're looking at larger metropolitan areas, a lot of suburban areas, golf hubs like, Myrtle Beach, Florida, Scottsdale, Arizona, those kind of things are just kind of saturated with great club fitters. But as far as rural areas, kind of smaller town municipal golf courses, those kinds of things, those club fitters are fewer and farther between. And then at individual clubs, the more commonplace, or at least what is becoming the more commonplace, is a club fitter will be fitting for a singular brand. So, for example, at a golf club, they may only be carrying clubs from Titleist or Callaway or Ping or something like that. And you can get a really, really great fitting with only one brand, but it does limit you in choices. And ultimately, if you want to find your individual best, you do need to be trying more than one brand, because even though some of the drivers are very similar, TaylorMade offers something different than Cobra does, who offers something different than Trixon does, who offers something different than Titleist does. And a lot of those products come in at different price points that may make them more or less valuable to a golfer, depending on how much she or he, has to spend as far as their golf game is concerned. So diving into the details of exactly what golfers could kind of be looking for when they're trying to evaluate club fitters. So let's start there. When you're looking for a club fitter, the first thing you have to be sure of is that they're going to be fitting you with a launch monitor. So fitting without a launch monitor today is very outdated, to be quite frank. It's if you're not measuring what's happening with the golf ball, then the differences that you're trying to pull out from one club versus the other, they're just too small to really be able to realize with kind of a naked eye. There are obviously things that you can do without a launch monitor. Like you can tell if you like the sound and the feel of a club. You can tell if you like the way that it sits behind a golf ball. You can tell what kind of shot shape you're going to hit. Like it's very easy to pick out if you're hitting, a fade or a draw, or if you're slicing a driver or hooking a driver, for example. But as far as dialing in launch, spin, total distance, carry distance, these kinds of things, you simply can't do that without some sort of accurate monitoring technology. And I think the other big mistake that I see when people go and they get a club fitting with a club fitter is they don't use the golf ball that they're going to be using on the golf course. And that is a paramount um, item that you establish during your entire club fit. You should be hitting all the clubs that are going to go into your golf bag with the golf ball you are going to be using. And if you're not, you might be fitting yourself for the wrong clubs that are complementing the golf ball that you are using. And what I mean by that, for example, is that generally speaking, some range balls will spin much less than kind of tour level premium golf balls that other golfers will be using. A side effect of that, if they are getting fit with these range balls or lower quality golf balls, is that they may be adding excessive spin in their driver or their fairways or irons or whatever they're getting fit for in order to compensate for the lower spinning range ball that they're using. But then when they take a better ball to the golf course with their new clubs they just got fit for, they have too high of spin because they just now mixed their higher spinning clubs that overcompensated for their low spin range ball with a higher spin golf ball. So now you're in a completely different spin window. And now all of a sudden what you thought was a good fit really is not so much of a good fit because you've changed half of the equation, right? Half the equation is the golf club you're using, half the equation is the golf ball you're using. And if you're missing 50% of that in your fitting, then you're really not quite getting a clear picture of what you really should be doing. And so those are the kind of the common things that I see as far as people going to get club fit. And I think later we may talk a little bit more in detail about people that are testing for themselves and like how they're maybe going to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's first jump into like those who do have these fitted centers, the Dick's Sporting Goods, the Golf Galaxy places, PGA Store, whatever it may be. They can go in, they can talk to a professional who's going to have abundant of different clubs for them to try out, and then I'm sure you're going to be able to use your own balls there. I would assume. What's that process look like? As far as what should they do when they approach the fitter and tell them what they're looking for and how they're going to be incorporating that with Golf EQ.
Yeah, the people that I find that are most successful in these kind of club fitting endeavors are people that go in treating it half like a club fitting and half like a lesson. So you really should take that time to learn about your game, especially if you don't know a lot about your swing already, right? If you don't know your club head speed, if you don't know your things like club path and your angle of attack and maybe your face to path relationships and maybe why the golf ball is curving the way that it's curving after you hit it with the golf club. Or if you don't really understand the differences of the golf clubs, right? What's the difference between the Titleist TSI 3 and the TSI 2? Or the Ping G425 LST or the G425 Max? Like what are the differences between those clubs? And usually if you go in and you have a very knowledgeable club fitter, they're going to be able to break down those differences to you in a way that you can understand and hopefully help apply to your game such that you shoot better scores. So when you walk in, you should treat it as both a club fitting and a lesson. So you're in there learning about your swing, you're learning about kind of the good parts and the bad parts about your swing, and then ultimately what you're trying to do is find a golf club that matches you currently and also helps you to grow into whatever golfer you want to be. So sometimes if you're just an amateur golfer and you go out and play for fun, that means building you the absolute best golf club for the swing that you're presenting right now. If you're maybe a more serious golfer who is dedicated to taking lessons or dedicated to practicing all the time, and you think your swing is going to be growing or improving or changing in some way, then you have to keep in mind that maybe you're not just fitting the club for right now, but also for whatever you want your future swing to look like. And so in that process, it needs to be a conversation. It needs to be a dialogue back and forth with your club fitter. You need to tell them kind of what your goals are out of that club fit. And then you need to hope that they enable you to kind of reach those goals in a way. I do see some common pitfalls with golfers and club fitters. Often club fitters want to put golfers in too many things. They want to evaluate too many different lofts. They want to evaluate too many different lies. They want to evaluate too many different club heads, too many different shafts, those kind of things. And that's when people really run into problems in not getting a proper fit. And it's simply because the golfer in a one club fitting session runs out of either time, energy, or both. And what we've seen in our testing kind of time and time again is most golfers can get about 50 swings in one day until their performance and or their energy level really starts to drop off. And when I say 50 swings, I'm talking about kind of like your longer clubs, drivers, fairways, hybrids, those kind of things. You can swing more irons, you can swing more wedges, putters, obviously you can kind of hit all day. And this will be impacted by the golfer's fitness level. So, think about, running on a treadmill or something. Like if you're more fit, you can run on a treadmill for slightly longer than somebody who maybe just started exercising. But the overall punchline of that is really 50 swings is how many you want to take in your club fitting session that are truly high quality and that are truly testing the different things that you're swapping out. After that, it becomes more a test of you of the golfer and how long you can swing the golf club in what would be a fairly consistent manner. And the other issue that we see is golfers simply are not hitting enough shots with the things that they're testing. So they'll get a driver in their hands, they'll hit maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 shots with that club, and they'll switch to the next one. And the reality is the variation of strike point on the golf club face overwhelms the differences of the products in those smaller sample sizes. So we really need to see golfers hitting things 10 to 15. Usually we set 12 as our floor times so that they really have a good sample size there to pull from when they're looking at the data.
Okay. So let's look at like middle of the road. We have the in-store, fitting you can do, and then you have all the launch monitors that we'll talk about, the at-home stuff. What about these these kind of, I guess you call it like a fun center to go to, and not quite like a dry shack or Top Golf, but like the indoor facilities, that have, a bunch of bays, and they're there for, people to have fun with, but they have pretty high quality launch monitors. Is that something that we could use, like go in there and do like say the 50 to 60 shots and really be tracking our swing speeds, because it does give you all that information, right?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, especially if that's what you have access to, and you don't have access to those high, what would be considered, high quality fitting, dedicated studios. But yeah, anytime you can get on a machine that's going to allow you to learn about yourself or your game, it's helpful. And that's where other systems, if you really don't have access to anything like that, then simply using Arcos or something like that, where you're on the course and you're hitting shots and you're being monitored in that way, and then kind of retroactively at the end of the year, you can go back through your Arcos data and say, wow, my irons are great, but my wedges are really underperforming. Maybe I need to look at that section of my bag to see if I can upgrade that equipment. Or, wow, my irons and wedges are great, but my driver is really struggling. I hit more 3-woods off the tee than I hit drivers. And maybe that's a product of your swing, or maybe it's because your driver doesn't complement your swing as well as your 3-wood does. And then that might be an opportunity to go in and look at something. So anytime you can, kind of begin to collect insights about yourself, about what your golf swing is, about the golf clubs that you have, I think it's incredibly valuable to kind of take note of that, and to do it, even at a Top Golf or a Drive Shack, or like you're outlining, any place where you kind of go in and have a good time and take some swings. I think it's great. I'm all for the various levels of kind of golf intensity, if you will. If you're an amateur golfer and you just play golf to have fun, then I support that 100%. And you can take all those opportunities that you're already doing to improve your game, if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I know they have the TrackMans there, but now I'm thinking about, I don't quite recall them doing club head speed and club path and all that. Do they give you that information?
I think it's the facility dependent. So okay. I do know that Top Golf and Drive Shack at most of their locations does provide some info for swing parameters, if you will, club speed. I don't know if they do path or angle of attack or what they're doing. Then I think we have to have a separate discussion about how accurate those machines would be if you're trying to translate that to
because they're out on the range, like they're way out there. They're not sitting right behind you.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, now let's take it to the other extreme. The at-home tester. I mean, it's 2021. We have the Mevo Plus, the Ripsato, all of the different ranges of launch monitors you can buy, from a couple $100 to obviously going up to 10, 15 grand, but it's affordable, right? People can be in their garage doing their thing, or, but let's talk about it like you're talking seeing golf ball, right? To use throughout your practice. Obviously you're not going to do that at the range, and say your local club, you're a member there, you're not going to be hitting your own golf balls at the range. Would you recommend them then playing, say, 9 holes, 18 holes, and tracking their shots that way? Like, is that something beneficial? I mean, it's a situational scenario, obviously, and they're not going to have flat lies and all that, but I think it's something to value.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, I think that if they have a monitor and they can get indoors with their own golf ball, that's the best place to start.
Yeah.
Because that's when you're really in that controlled environment. You're not reacting to, like you said, different lies, different types of grasses, different temperatures, different winds, those kind of things. All those things I just mentioned, those kind of external environmental factors influence golfers in ways that sometimes golfers don't even know. Right? They're reacting in real time to those things. And so having it in a controlled environment on a mat with your ideal golf ball, with your best golf ball that you're going to be using is the best place to start. But then I would always recommend people after that to go out and play holes with those things. If you could play, maybe you're at your local course and you can play the same 9 back to back. And what you would do in that case is let's say you have 2 drivers out at your local course. What I would suggest is versus playing the front 9 and the back 9 one day, play the front 9 twice or the back 9 twice. And what you do is you would hit driver, you would hit one model of driver on every other hole is what I would suggest. So let's use let's say that you on the front 9, you're going to hit driver on 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 9. Let's just say as an example, and you have 2 drivers. What I would suggest is I would hit driver 1 on hole 1, driver 2 on hole 2, and then flip that orientation. But then when you play the back 9 the second time, switch it. So hit driver 2 on hole 1, driver 1 on hole 2. And so then at least what you're creating is you're hitting multiple shots. So you're at least going to get 4 to 5 shots with each club on each side, basically. And then you're also going to get the same hole played on the same day with both clubs. And then obviously if you have no one behind you, if you're not worried about pace of play, that kind of thing, then hitting 2 tee shots each time, but reversing the order. So the first time you come up, you hit driver 1, then you hit driver 2. The next time you hit driver 2, then you hit driver 1. So you're not biasing towards, your first swing being better or your second swing being better. Because truthfully, what happens if you do that, if you hit 2 in a row, you hit the first one, then you react to the first one, even when you switch products. So if you slice the first one, for example, you're going to aim for the left, you're going to do everything you can to compensate not to hit as far right. So again, that's when golfers are reacting in real time and not just simply testing the product, but also testing themselves. And that's incredibly valuable information to do. But that's why it's really, really important to start with that kind of internal controlled sample to then take those results out on the course and test them. And I think to your earlier point, using things like those portable launch monitors on the course is great, but it can kind of be cumbersome and time consuming. What I would really recommend is to start inside with their golf ball, get the club set up such that they know it's going to complement the golf ball they're ultimately playing, and then hitting both of those side by side with those monitors on the range and just realizing that the performance is going to change slightly because they're using the range ball.
Yeah. So that brings us to the launch monitor. What do you think what's best for people? Obviously, there's a value there, in terms of price versus performance, and
Yep.
some can do more than what others can't. What do you recommend overall? What's your, let's call it top 3?
Yeah, there's roughly, so there's a couple monitors that we would throw out completely, kind of in the consumer demographic. Right? No one's out there buying TrackMans, no one's out there buying GC quads, and then FlightScope has their kind of flagship high-end tour level models that like you mentioned earlier, kind of 10K plus that really probably aren't even worth it for even the most dedicated golfers, unless they're just looking for that kind of like in-home, true to life golf simulator scenario, and that's kind of a different conversation. But as far as in the personal consumer market, the FlightScope Mevo Plus comes in, the last time I checked, it was roughly $2,000. And for $2,000, if you use the magnetic fiducials they have that you can put on the golf ball inside, you're getting some pretty accurate data for what would be, a very small fraction of the overall price of those tour monitors. So I would say that at $2,000, that's a pretty good price point. Then all of a sudden, if you start dropping back to the $500 price point, we've got Rapsodo that I think is established. And the only con that I think exists in that device is that it kind of demands a lot of your cell phone. So you have to use your cell phone to kind of power the device. It kind of sucks the battery, that kind of thing. So I think there's some holdups there. FlightScope's original Mevo also comes in at that $500 roughly price point. And I think I would call it middle of the road as far as in terms of performance. And we've got some new ones that are entering the market now, basically. Garmin just came out with theirs. I believe they call it the G10. It's a portable launch monitor. It has a partnered phone app, but it doesn't have to have the phone to run the monitor. I do think it does have to have the phone to display the results. But as far as tracking the results, it does it completely on a body. And we've actually got that coming in, I believe this week. And we're going to be putting it up right next to the quad, doing a small study to see how it compares in terms of swing parameters, so like speed, angle of attack, club head path, and then also golf ball parameters, so launch, spin, distance, all those kind of things. So that's really exciting, because I think that as personal launch monitors progress, they really are beginning to get to a point where golfers are receiving, let's call it arbitrarily 80 to 90% of the value of these industry class GC quads and TrackMans for, roughly 2-3% of the overall price. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, I've been looking at the Mevo myself. I felt like that was like good value for me, but I'm gonna check out that Garmin. Um, let's see. So we've gone over, so what should someone do if there isn't a club fitter in your area? Um, they don't want to buy a launch monitor. What kind of route can they go?
yeah, so this is where it gets difficult to know for sure, because I would say that depending on their seriousness level, if they're just going out to have fun, then I think they need a very simple advice. They just need advice that's going to allow them to hit the kind of shot shape they want. And if they're giving up 10 yards off the tee, then it probably ultimately is not going to be the biggest deal to them. So those golfers kind of simply need to be getting as many clubs in their hands as possible, right? Going into a Sporting Goods or a Golf Galaxy, taking a look at all of them, setting them on the ground. Usually those places have a bay area where you can at least go in and just hit the clubs to see what kind of subjective feedback you get. How's it look? How's it sound? How's it feel? Those kind of things. Are you comfortable with a particular shaft? Do you need to go heavier? Do you need to go stiffer? Those kinds of things. And then from there, really the decisions that you're making are hosel settings. So either what club head you're buying. So normally, you got a 10.5 degree option, you got a 9-degree option, you got a 12-degree option. And then also what settings are you going to put the club in to kind of help you dial in launch, spin, and direction. And that's really when you kind of need the launch monitor to start measuring. But if you don't have that and you're really just kind of taking them out to the range or, hitting them in a bay, then you kind of have to do as good a job as you can of knowing, do you need more height? Do you need more spin? Do you need less spin? Those kind of things. And that's where the things that we're rolling out in the driver identifier are really going to be able to help people. So they'll be able to walk into, a Dick's Sporting Goods or anything like that. Or, hopefully eventually we think we're going to have some products that will be able to help golfers ascertain some information. They can use Arcos, they can figure out these kind of things about their golf swing, come to the driver identifier, they input that information, and then we will give them a short list, including the loft, lie, and hosel settings they need. And hopefully that will get them, let's call it again, 80 to 90% of the way home, where that other 10% missing would be the things they could achieve if they were able to eventually go and see those high-end club fitters.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, you mentioned the golf identifier and how, having those numbers, from our launch monitor is going to help us. What is like the most important number to look at? And then maybe go down, in terms of importance from there.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question, I think. So our mathematical models of delivery basically input the largest kind of the weighted factors, if you will, are player delivery on a swing speed basis. And essentially what you end up drawing is a vector of delivery in 3 dimensions that includes club path, angle of attack, face to path relationships, all centered around golfer variance. So standard deviation based on their ability to deliver the golf club head, strike variance, their ability to strike the golf ball in a kind of singular part of the head, and then also their club head speed. And then club head speed correlates to a bunch of different things in the golf course. It gives you kind of outside potential, it gives you distance potential, it gives you all kinds of things, dictates your maximum impact force, et cetera, et cetera. So it's interesting to try to pull apart each of those and then kind of give them some sort of arbitrary, most important versus worst important. But, I think that if I was going to generalize to most of the golf audience, I would say that the combination of club path and their face to path is going to dictate the type of golf shot they're going to hit. So whether they're hitting a draw or a fade. So I think it would be safe enough to say for most golfers and how it affects their kind of day-to-day golf, getting that club path in the right spot and then their face to path kind of matching whatever their club path is will help them hit the most functional golf shots. And then beyond that, angle of attack helps them dial in the right launches and spins. And then speed obviously kind of helps you hit it further or shorter depending on kind of what direction you're going in.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot to take in. Yeah, obviously, getting all that stuff in order is super important. I think that's all the questions. Was there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of launch monitors or anything like that?
No, I think the one thing that golfers should keep in mind when they're going into these golf club fittings or when they're going to kind of look for clubs themselves is, number one, they should enjoy it. This is not meant to be a job. They're playing golf. They like to golf. So they should enjoy the process of buying new clubs. And number two, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think golf always comes with frustrations, right? But it's okay that you're going to go in, you're going to make some inconsistent swings, and that's okay. You're trying to help yourself and you're trying to improve. And the next thing is that when they do go in for a club fitting, that is a service for them. So they need to be taking out as much information as they can from that service. They need to be making sure that the club fitter is there to help them and help them find their best, and that they're not simply being sold to, right? They don't need to be sold the newest equipment necessarily. They need
That's
to
what
go
I'm kind of
in
worried about. I do want to go in for a fitting, but I don't want to feel like I'm buying a car. What I mean?
Exactly. And it unfortunately, it does turn into that sometimes. The other thing about club fitting that can be frustrating for people, and I've felt this myself, and it's what kind of inspired part of the creation of Golf EQ, is that golfers don't know some information as they walk in, and that does leave a little bit of opportunity to either have misunderstandings or not quite understand what the club fitting can tell them. Club fitters are also limited in the amount of inventory they can hold, right? So you can't walk into most club fitting shops and try older drivers. So then you kind of always end up only hitting the newest model, and then you either have to purchase that model, which is kind of at your most expensive price point, or you have to try to figure out, okay, if the new Titleist TSI2 is the best driver for me, is the old TS2 the closest driver to the new TSI2, or it is because of the way that Titleist has changed the construction of these drivers, is now the old TS3 more like the new TSI2? And those are problems that I think most golfers would just land on the one with the most similar name would be the most similar, but we find time and time again that really isn't the case at all. Just as an example, the most similar driver to the TSI3 this year was last year's TaylorMade Sim. So completely different brand, completely different model. So it's not TSI3 to TS3. TS3 falls around where the new TSI3 falls, but it's much more kind of in line with TaylorMade's Sim. And it doesn't mean that they're the exact same driver, but I mean, if you're just drawing parallels between what is the most similar, then those two are kind of the most similar. And that's where, again, club fitters just don't simply have the time or the capacity to carry that much inventory.
Yeah, and it's also on the golfer, because they get familiar, with their brand and what they know, and so they kind of gravitate towards that, and maybe will block themselves, being open to other things. That's good stuff. Yeah, a lot of information there. I'm sure a lot of our viewers will have questions moving forward. So obviously, you're the guy to reach out to. What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of across most of the social media platforms. So Instagram is definitely where we spend most of our time kind of interacting with people. So very happy to follow up. DMs are kind of always open, really, and really like to engage with people that way. If they just find one of my posts and comment on it, I think I have about a 100% respond rate on the comments. So I love the dialogue, and I'm kind of here to help golfers. We love providing good information, and that's what we're here to do. So if they've got a question, they've just recently been into a club fit, they got recommended a club, they don't really understand why, they've kind of had their eyes on a different one. Maybe they're talking through the pros and cons of going with one versus the other. Maybe they just got fit for the new driver, and like I said, it's $500 and they can't quite afford that. So they need to know what older models most closely match the new model they just got fit for. We can do all of that. All that's information that we currently hold in our database. So that's all fairly easy stuff for us to kind of disseminate to golfers if they just kind of simply reach out. So I would say that direct message either on Instagram or Twitter would be best, but they can kind of find me anywhere.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Again, any questions that you may have about anything golf related, golf EQ related, reach out to Damon. Otherwise, get on the website, www.golf-eq.com. Check out that club identifier, kind of just roam around, see what you can figure out. If you can get fitted, go and do that. That's just going to help you so much more in the identifier. And please, any questions that you may have, leave a comment here in YouTube. Again, Damon is going to be fully responding to that, and he's the one that's running the channel. So he'll be able to answer any questions that you may have. And it's also going to give us more content to, lay out to everyone else later in the future. Because if you have a question, I'm sure there's a ton of other people that have the same question. So yeah, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will see you guys next week.